Mad Movie Mark movie review. Today I will be reviewing the 1930 Marx Brothers movie Animal Crackers. So this movie has a 96% on Rotten Tomatoes for a critic score and an 89% as an audience score, which actually is a lot higher than I thought it would be. I was under the impression that not a lot of people are still Marx Brothers fans. I didn't really get into the Marx Brothers. Let's say it was about maybe 12 or 13 years ago is when I really started watching Marx Brothers movies and absolutely falling in love with them. And I didn't, I know that the Marx Brothers have been around for a long time. This is almost a 100-year-old movie. But Rotten Tomatoes wasn't a thing until the early 90s. So that means a lot of people have been watching their movies over the last 20, 30 years. And I think that's pretty great. So it stars Groucho Marx as Jeffrey T. Spalding. If you guys aren't familiar with Marx Brothers movies, he basically has a three name, first name, middle initial, last name in every movie he's in. So this one, he's Jeffrey T. Spalding. Harper Marks is the professor. Chico Marx is Signor Emmanuel Rivelli. Zeppo Marx is Horatio Jameson. Margaret Dumont plays Mrs. Rittenhouse, and Lillian Roth plays Arabella Rittenhouse. This movie, to describe what a Marx Brothers movie about, it doesn't really matter, really. The plot is kind of a backdrop to the crazy silliness that's going on around you. But essentially, Jeffrey T. Spalding has just come back from an African safari. He is a big name in this town. He has just come back from an African safari. He is coming to a big party that is being thrown for him by Mrs. Rittenhouse. $1 million, it's a $100,000 painting will be unveiled at this party, but in today's figures, that's got to be well over $1 million. He is accompanied by his secretary, Horatio Jameson, and then the professor and Signor Emmanuel Rivelli, which I don't know if we really ever find out what they are. Maybe we do in the beginning. I don't remember, but those are the core Marx Brothers, those four. So upon his return to this party from Africa, the story basically is that he is pursuing this lady named Mrs. Rittenhouse, who is, he believes, is rich. At the same time, there's kind of a convoluted story going on in the background where there's two people who want to steal this $100,000 painting. They don't want to steal it for financial gain, but they want to steal it because they believe that they can make a copy of the painting, and then they will become famous because they were able to copy this painting, and they will become rich, essentially. So that is what the movie's about. And then at the end of the movie, everything's kind of tied up all together. You find out who stole the painting. The guy who thought he could recreate the painting does recreate it well, and they offer him a commission to paint more, and it ends happily, basically. So what did I think of this movie? Well, this movie is my favorite Marx Brothers movie. I've seen all their major movies, Horse Feathers, Coconuts. There's more. I've seen them all. This is my favorite of all those movies. This isn't I think Duck Soup is their most famous movie. I've seen Duck Soup. I think that's considered their pinnacle of greatness. That's considered their greatest piece of work. I prefer Animal Crackers over Duck Soup. I just think that Animal Crackers is more funny. Groucho Marx, to me, is on his game in this movie, and so is Chico, and it's just hilarious. So for me, Groucho Marx has slowly become one of my favorite actors of all time. He's definitely in my top 5 of all time, and that's just because how quick-witted he is. I've heard some of his lines and things that he does in his movies are completely ad-libbed, which is fantastic, because if that's true, him and his brothers have such a great back and forth banter with each other, but he especially, to me, is just so witty. He can take world events, he can take math, he can basically take anything and just make a really quick one-line piece of humor out of it. And it's his one-liners that are great, but then he could take the one-liners and he could keep spinning those one-liners into more one-liners, but keep the same topic, going and actually argue something cohesively, which is crazy. Uh, when I first saw this movie, I couldn't believe that some of it was ad-libbed because it's just so hilarious. It's almost like if you watch, this isn't the Marx Brothers, but if you watch the Who's On First skit, which if you haven't seen it by Abbott Costello, you should go to YouTube and Google Who's On First. But Who's On First has probably the greatest like back and forth banter of all time. And for me, this movie does that, but it does it throughout the entire movie, which is just amazing. I can't gush and tell you how much I love this movie more. So Groucho Marx to me is the best actor in this movie. He is the funniest person in this movie. Chico is also hilarious to me. And I'm going to be perfectly honest, I don't get Harper Marx's comedy. And that pretty much goes through all of his movies. I understand he's great at playing the harp. And he is supposed to be funny because he's constantly chasing women and he has like these hijinks that he gets himself into. But there's the points in this movie that I don't like all involve Harper Marks. In the beginning, Harper Marks, it's kind of in a situation where he shows up to the party, he takes off his coat, and he's kind of like in his underclothes, and everyone gasps and they try to like tell him to put his clothes back on, and he grabs a gun and he just starts shooting at things, shooting at women, shooting at the clock. He shoots a bird, and it's just weird. And these parts of the movie are kind of what bring it to a complete stop to me. It's zany, yes, but is it funny? I don't think it is. There's also a scene where he pretends like he's punching Miss Rittenhouse in the stomach, not for a lot of reason. I didn't find that to be very humorous either. I don't know. Call me cynical, but I don't think that like making or pretending to beat up a woman is funny. And it doesn't really make the scene any better. It doesn't make the story make any more sense. It makes less sense because he's doing this. So the Harper Marks scenes I could do without. I know there's a lot of Harper Marks fans out there who like the Marx Brothers, but he's just not for me. So there's a lot of funny lines in this movie, and even watching this, I've probably seen Animal Crackers maybe 15 times now, and I still find myself just cracking up in some of these scenes. So specifically, in the beginning, Jeffrey T. Spalding says, "Thank you for inviting me to your lovely home." And Mrs. Rittenhouse says, "It's been a great... this is actually like my poor home, not my great home." And he's all like, "Oh, it's not so bad. Wait a minute. I think you're right. It is pretty bad." He just goes on this tangent about, well, we could make some changes into this house. All you got to do is sign this contract. Obviously, I can't do him any justice. But that scene, I just can't stop laughing. It's so hilarious. There's also a little bit later in the movie, Emmanuel Rivelli, who's Chico Marx. When he first comes into the scene, he's like he has a band. He's a band player, leader of a band, and they said, "Whoa, we couldn't fly in yesterday, and it's good we couldn't because you couldn't have afforded us a day early." And then let me see. Yesterday we weren't here. That was $10. We rehearsed. That's another $20. So it's basically like he gets paid more money if he doesn't show up and if he rehearses or he doesn't play at all, as opposed to playing. And the way he does this whole scene is just fantastic. It is hilarious. There's also a point in the movie where Groucho Marx is near two people, Mrs. Rittenhouse, and I think the other one is Arabella Rittenhouse. And he says, "Why don't we get married?" And Arabella says, "You mean both of us? That would be bigamy." And he says, "I know, that is bigamy, and that's big of you, and that's big of all of us." I could not stop laughing at that point. There's just a few other scenes I'm going to talk about just because they're so hilarious. There's a point where Chico, let's call him Emmanuel Rivelli, and the professor are in the dark, and they're trying to take the painting, and Emmanuel Rivelli says, where's the flesh? The flesh. Give me the flesh. It's supposed to be a flashlight, but he calls it the flesh. I think he's Italian in this movie, and he calls it the flesh. Where's the flesh? And Harper Marks, he takes out a fish. He's like, no, that's a fish. I need the flesh. Then he takes out a flask. He's like, oh, not the flask. I need a flesh. And then he takes out 4 cards, and it's a flesh. It's like, no, that's a flesh. And then he takes out a flitz, which is like a grater. He's like, no, not the flitz. I need the flesh. And he takes out a flute and starts playing the flute. It's like, no, that's a flute. I need the flesh. And then finally takes out the flashlight. That's one Harper Marks scene that I can deal with because he's not beating up any women or shooting a gun. That whole scene that unravels is just comedy gold. It's fantastic. The next scene is probably the most famous quote from this movie, which Groucho Marx says, one morning I shot an elephant in my pajamas. How he got in my pajamas, I'll never know. Absolute craziness. And then there's 2 other things I want to talk about. There's a scene in the movie where everyone's cheering Spalding, and they go, 3 cheers for Captain Spalding, 3 cheers for Captain Spalding, 3 cheers for Captain Spalding. And then Harper Marks runs onto the stage with 3 chairs instead of 3 cheers. He just has 3 chairs in his hand, which is just ridiculous. And then the last one I want to talk about is a part that I think is the craziest to me, because I know for a fact that this whole scene was ad-libbed, because this is a regular skit that Chico and Groucho did, in which Groucho will just say, take a letter to my lawyer. And then after that, it just becomes off the cuff type of thing. So there's a point at the end of the movie where he says, take a letter to my lawyer. And then I can't do the rest of the bit any justice, but it's also comic gold. So my friend saw this movie when I was in the Film Pigeons, and we did the Film Pigeons podcast. My friends saw this movie, and they did not find the humor in it. They didn't think it was funny. I think one of my friends who was doing the podcast with me, he just thought it was kind of meandering, and there was no real point or plot to the movie. It just kind of went from like scene to scene. And I will say that there are scenes in this movie where Groucho is kind of referencing things that no one's going to know right now, because they're movies or they're plays, or there's something that happened almost 100 years ago that no one's ever heard of. So they're not going to be funny to us. So there are a lot of hits and misses in this movie, and I would say probably maybe as many misses as hits, but the hits are just so funny that I'm okay with being confused on the misses, because I know any movie I watch that's going to be in the 1920s, that's a comedy that's trying to reference things, or in the 1930s, of course I'm not going to get it. It's like when I watch, even today, when I watch Britain's Got Talent, and there's a comedian on Britain's Got Talent that's trying to do impressions or trying to do pop culture jokes, I have no idea what they're talking about, because it's like night and day, our television shows and their television shows, until we get to a point where we steal the ideas of their television shows. Then it's the same. But I'm not going to get these references, and you're not going to get references from 100 years ago. So you have to go into the movie knowing that there's stuff you're not going to understand. But that's fine, because there's still comedy bits that even from 1930 that can still make you laugh out loud. And I think that's absolutely amazing to be able to, years and years after you've passed and you leave this body of work around, that people are still enjoying and that they can still have a laugh about, to me is amazing. And that's why Groucho Marx is one of my favorite actors of all time, because he was way ahead of himself, I feel like. And this movie, to me, I'm going to give this movie, I'll give it a 9, because I'll leave that 1 point for the references that I don't get. but this movie definitely is a 9 for me. It's one of my favorite comedies of all time. It might be like third or fourth on my list. It's just fantastic. So if you get a chance and you want to see a movie that's a little, sorry, the film is dated, obviously, but if you want to see a movie that's really funny, I suggest watching Animal Crackers. Thank you. Have a good day.